Well, in the previous episodes, we covered on how and why it is important to think about whether you are a remote friendly or a remote first company. In this section, we want to talk about why asynchronous communication, a culture of documentation, and strategic synchronous communication can help remotish teams to stay in sync. So, synchronous communications, conversations where a quick back and forth is possible and participants are present at the same time, falls short for remotish teams for the reasons illustrated in the previous episodes. Working synchronously across different time zones favors the critical mass in the office. It puts remote team members at a disadvantage, scrambling to make every early morning and late evening calls or missing out on them entirely. This is why asynchronous communication, where participants communicate as they are available and discussion is punctuated by intermittent gaps, serves for remotish teams very well. Team members don't need to be online at the same time or in the same physical location to respond to emails, create conversation threads, or collaborate in cloud-based software apps like Google Docs or any other cloud-based application. Instead, they can choose their own productive working hours. And that's what we want, right? We want to work and we aim at working when we are more productive. And this should be the default to deep work and answer messages, and we should only answer messages when we are open to being interrupted. Remotish teams should adopt asynchronous communication as the primary source of correspondence to put all team members on equal footing. Remote first means being asynchronous first. What does it mean? Synchronous first would mean that we in our organization have a default to meetings. We are focusing on real-time collaboration. We're encouraging always-on culture. And very often we fleet conversations. And this is a very exclusive mindset. So think about it. Are you a synchronous first organization? Or are you an asynchronous first organization with a default to writing, where time zones are not important, where focus on deep work is important, where you're encouraging mindful disconnection, where you are very strong in permanent documentation and therefore have an inclusive mindset? So think about that when you want to reimagine each of your gatherings from first principles. What do you miss when you eliminate face-to-face conversation? Can these be replicated asynchronously? Could a written status update replace maybe a daily or weekly stand-up? And how could you brainstorm feedback, problem solve, decision make, move from Zoom to a written thread? Asynchronous first teams don't only benefit remote team members. For office-bound team members who are on vacation, for example, they take sick days or simply miss a meeting, there is a trove of written communication on asynchronous teams that anyone can refer back to. Asynchronous communications therefore also benefits future employees who can examine a company's communication archive and get up to speed on all things work and culture. What do you also have to think about when we talk about an asynchronous first culture? You need to build a culture of documentation. So when individuals and teams are striving for an important goal, it's crucial they're all heading in the same direction, right? On a remote team where close collaborators may be spread across countries, shoulder taps and quick check-ins aren't that feasible. Instead, it's important to build a culture of documentation where everything is written down to help our future selves. Clear and concise documentation allows remote individuals to work more independently without having to wait on an answer from their managers on how to do something. On team projects, documentation can serve as both a source of truth and a living document that's improved upon by a group. Here are now a few important areas where centralized and accessible documentation should exist. Company policies, the core values and operating principles. When we talk about project management system guidelines, critical service outage instructions, technical implementation resources, product and project roadmaps, as well as career development paths. Think now about your organization. Are all of these areas of interest accessibly from anyone, from anywhere, or are you still struggling? When we talk about documentation and making synchronous communication accessible, it is very important also to consider, what do you do with your synchronous communication? You need to make it available asynchronously, and that is why it is so important that you also record your video calls. Sometimes a meeting just cannot be attended, and therefore you need to have a default to record all video conversations and make them available for viewing later in a central place for all team members. For example, with your team, you could have a YouTube channel where you centralize many of your team meetings recorded video calls. That could be a possibility. By adopting remote first practices like asynchronous first communication and building a writing culture, remote teams can sidestep the challenges that come with time zones and find ways to collaborate effectively across continents on work that matters. If you want to know more about how to effectively lead and work in a hybrid or virtual team, get in touch with us. We're happy to discuss your challenges.